All right, three, two, one, go. We are live. Hello, users. We are not live. This is being recorded. I am with a Twitter user, David Rubin's blocked list. And to my understanding, you are a rioter and a looter. Is that correct?
Yes. That's not my professional career, but actually at work this morning I was informed that I was on the news.
Oh, really?
Um, yeah, I was hoping I could prepare the clip, but on the local Spectrum newscast, I was all over their YouTube channel. I couldn't find the actual clip. But if you can visualize me with a longboard possibly blocking pepper balls and or tear gas, that's pretty much the visual that was on the news this weekend.
Amazing.
Um, yes, and for reference, I'm from Rochester, New York, where you may be aware that the murder of Daniel Prude occurred in March. Of course, the police and the leadership of our law enforcement hid this tape. The tape was released, and there's pretty much been nightly protests ever since, calling for harsher repercussions and accountability for the officers. Right now, they're on suspension, and yeah, that's pretty much the background for what's
Okay.
going on right now.
So, okay. Now, I haven't followed Rochester as closely as I followed other cities. So you're kind of going to be my first gateway into a lot of this stuff. Have the protests been happening every single night? And if so, since like when? Like, is this like day 15 or what do we got?
It hasn't even quite been a full week. I believe the first it was Wednesday or Thursday night was the first night. Um, and I was out there Friday night when I had a night off of work. And if anyone watching isn't familiar with this particular protest, um, a person I've referred to as Walmart brand Andy No. I don't know his actual name. He's an alt-writer that lives in Malaysia. I don't want to signal boost him on your channel, but um, he was posting video clips that made it around Twitter pretty quickly. Are you familiar with what I'm talking about? There were some people standing on the roof.
I have seen a few clips. I'm not totally familiar with the ones that you're mentioning. But there's the thing about this is there's so many clips, and the right wing media loves to just kind of lump them all together like BLM rioters and looters, and they barely ever distinguish what city is what and what the context is. So I've probably seen the clip, but I don't remember which one specifically.
Exactly. So I think anytime you look at one of these individual protests, you're getting a microcosm of a bigger picture. So this was the situation where I was there marching through the city the night that this clip was taken, and every single person that you could see, and this is in the city. The video said that this was the suburbs because that's the image the right wing is trying to paint, and everyone's coming out on their porches showing their support. A group of people were standing on their own roof, which of course what the story as it was told was that rioters climbed on the roof.
So this was okay. So people who owned that property were
Hmm.
showing their support for the protests by standing on their own roof and like hollering. Is that the
Yeah,
picture?
yeah, and you can see in the video that there's a window that leads right out to the roof
Mm-hmm.
over the top of the right over the top of the um just over the porch. I guess not the awning, the thing.
Yeah, we've all played Minecraft. We know what we're talking about here.
Yeah, so this is just a case of they found a clip of video and they wanted whatever story they could put to it. They ran with, but that wasn't really the case. Um, there was also two restaurants had a little bit of vandalism occur, some flipped tables, some broken glass,
Oof.
um, and of course that was projected as being chaos through the entire city, which it was really just an isolated incident. Both restaurants posted to their social media the following morning, "We understand the hurt that the citizens are feeling. We support them 100% uh, in their demands for justice for
That's
Daniel Prude
Yeah,
in
that's
their.
typically the story. Is like people will circulate, and this happened in Kenosha. This happened in Minneapolis. People will circulate these clips of rioters and looters burning stuff down, and then like you
Mhm.
see the people that actually own that property is like, yeah, I agree with them. Yeah, I'm on their side. Like, yeah, it sucks that I have to deal with this, but at the same time, you know what else sucks? People being shot and killed. So it's like one of those situations where the right wing media will just like throw this out there, and then they'll like their explanation for it's like, oh, why are the property owners saying this? Is like, oh, they're SJW cucked and they're afraid of the rioters and looters, and this is like we're like this is one of those things where we've been in this like post-truth era for like a couple years now, right? Where like you have multiple different segments of society that live in their own universe, right? Like I feel like one of my little fun conspiracy theories is I think the internet is actually like it's not actually on our universe. I think this is like we're finding like continuums from other multiverses because like some of the stuff that these people come up with is so bizarre. Like in a lot of these people's heads, like every time a black person commits any crime whatsoever, they're automatically BLM, left wing, Antifa. So it's like they'll like cite like Chicago crime statistics and say, "See, left wing violence," and it's like what, and like one of
Mhm.
the things as well with what happened in Portland last week or 2 weeks ago is that like now they've actually got one incident of someone self-identifying as Antifa killing someone, and now that's just they've been running with it over and over again. When we've seen right wingers attack people and like kill people at protests, we've seen cops kill people at protests, and they just ignore it. So like this is something that like when it comes to these individual cities, it's for them, for these right-wing people and the people that consume this kind of media, they're not interested in, oh, what's going on in Rochester? Let me look at this. They just see like a 15-second clip and just assume the whole city's burning. Because these are the same people that like, I mean, I've got people in my family, and I live in the rural South right now, right?
Mhm.
And it's like, I have people in my family that are like, oh, black people are running through the streets, burning everything down. Like, our town has like 10,000 people in it. Like, like there's like maybe 5 black people in the whole town, right? But somehow like these people are like, they've painted a picture where there's like, oh my God, there's civil unrest. People are burning everything down. And in reality, it's like maybe there's like a couple incidents. Like I like my thing is like there's probably less examples of burning down, like burned down buildings than there are of like what their like notion of the coronavirus like death rate. It's like the coronavirus death rate is only like 2% or whatever, like whatever their meme is, right? Like
Yes.
in reality though, like that's completely fine. The coronavirus is fake news because the death rate is so low. Yet when it comes to these violence at protesters or at protests, all of a sudden that 2% identifies everything. All of a sudden that is the most important thing. And it's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. So like you've been at these protests, right? Like
Yes.
what is the energy on the ground? Like, do you communicate with people? Do you like try to get what a lot of people are feeling? Like, what is the kind of general consensus?
Well, the only way I can really describe how the atmosphere was, and it went from 0 to 60. So starting at 0, at the end of the march, we were marching towards the public safety building, and there were women and children. It was just, if you're not familiar with Rochester, we have a phenomenal music scene. It was like any festival where you would have the road closed down, people of all ages, all races and ethnicities, like just a complete palette of distributed of white and brown and black and every shade in between. And it was incredibly peaceful. Um, some of the leaders, the organizers, were speaking, had some great words to say, and then just just as everything is just as everything is going smoothly, there's no sign of tension or escalation. We're 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 at the police barricaded off a bridge. So at this point, everything's isolated and contained. And I was right up front to see that there is no debate that the police initiated what the media would describe as clashes in most instances. They started firing pepper balls. There were definitely children struck with these. They were shooting them at eye level. I know following nights, tear gas canisters were were dispersed. There was canines involved. People were saying it was like Selma, and it was just completely unnecessary. The From that point, then the protest was pushed back. It ended up blocking multiple intersections, off ramps to 490. Multiple protesters were hit with cars later that night.
Yeah, I saw
Um,
that. I made a video about this the other day or yesterday,
yes, I did
where
catch that.
I
That
saw
was the
like,
same night.
oh yeah, so like whenever you see these isolated instances of violence, it's usually not protesters or rioters or looters doing something. It's usually cops or right-wing agitators coming in to attack people. Um, and that's what's so profound about this. And again, like
Hmm.
I was describing earlier, like these people have this idea that like black people are running rampant and it's a race war and stuff. But when you actually go to these protests, it's like, oh, there's every kind of person. There's white people, there's women, children, there's like old people, there's like middle-aged people, like there's like all these kinds of like it's like a total like you know collage of all kinds of people, because in reality most people see police murder people and get offended by that. Like, I've been the victim of police violence. I've been swatted. I've had cops, like, during their swatting process, like, beat the shit out of my mom. So it's like, I've had police brutality incidents, right? I know what this is about. But like they try to, like, the right-wing media narrative, which is so prolific right now, is like they try to, like, isolate it. Oh, it only happens to black people. But wait, no, that happens to all lives. But wait, no, it's blue lives matter. Like what? Like they always, like, it's shifting narratives, right? So like
Yes.
when you're at these protests and you see like what the police are doing, like what these right wing agitators are doing, like what is the response in real time when police start firing? Like, what do protesters do? Like, do they scream and say run? Do they try to hold their ground? What is like the kind of tactic? Because at this point we should know that this is coming. And I'm sure that everyone going out to
Hmm.
protest knows that there's a good chance they will be injured or killed, Maybe not like a 5%, 10%, but maybe like a 2% chance they'll get killed. Definitely a lot higher than if you were staying at home, or definitely a lot higher if you were a Trump supporter, right? So like what is the
Yes.
kind of general reaction like in the moment when these protests go from peaceful and then the cops come out or whatever? Like what is like this those that 30-second window like?
It it was a little bit of everything that you can imagine as far as and I mean, I don't come from a background where I have any ill will towards police, and I could see a lot of people. I followed the news and I knew what was coming, but there were a lot of people that really thought that the police would handle this responsibly, if not at least strategically, and just not make a mess of things. So it was clearly just a show of force. Then there was also so few people that exploited, the type of opportunists that as soon as chaos broke out, someone was throwing a rock at a window, but people stopped him immediately because, you know, it was just people. So there were people saying, don't give the police an excuse to escalate things. I heard people calling out like, "Don't run! It's just pepper balls! Like, don't run!" Like, because one of the biggest dynamics that you're trying to maintain is that because it really just seemed like the crowd was more cognizant of keeping things under control. Don't run! Don't create chaos. If everyone runs back, then you lose the we, there's a dynamic where we're the community and we're protecting the community from the police, not that the police are protecting the community from some group of ruffian Antifas, because there were people with the shields and the stereotypical what the media would want portray you to be scared of. But when
Like
you're there
black
in the
bloc
moment,
attire, like that kind of
when
stuff?
you're yeah, and when you're there in the moment, those are the people protecting you. Police tackled a man in his wheelchair, and someone who ran up to defend that man out of instinct was arrested. So there's every which way there was just pure chaos in every direction. But also people just keeping what semblance of control could be kept,
Yeah, like a formation.
given the
Like that
circumstance.
way, like because when chaos does break out of these protests, people get scared. And people don't know who's on their side. They don't know like what's happening. Whereas when you do have these formations where you have like say black bloc and shield people in the front, like that
Hmm.
kind of stuff, you at least know who's like on your side of the line. You at least know who to stay close by or behind. But when people start running in every which direction, that's when things really just, get scary. You know? And I've been to a lot of these protests. Most of my protest experience was in 2018 and 2019. So I've been to a few violent protests, but most of the protest dynamic seems to have evolved into like a whole new form since my heyday. Because I used to live in Washington D.C. and I don't anymore. Um, but like when I went to those protests, there would always be like the groups of people in the front that would maybe be directly in line with the cops. So like in these protests that I've been to, it would be like say you have this small like Proud Boy like neo-Nazi like thing on the other side of the street, and they've got their like little cringe flags, and they're like doing their little God bless the USA chants or whatever, and then you got like you know 5 layers of police in the middle of the street, and then you've got like like people on the other side of the street that are counter protesters that are like wearing black bloc, or they have shields, umbrellas, that kind of stuff. Umbrellas are a lot more seen now than they were back then, but shields were
Hmm.
pretty prevalent back then. And then it's always like it always seems to me in all of the protests I've been to that it's always like, yeah, you're gonna have Antifa call a cop a pig or like mock them. But if
Yes.
you're a cop, right, and if you signed up for this job, you should, one, understand the Constitution and free speech, right? And two,
Yes.
not be easily triggered. Like, if someone calls you a pig and then you just, like, decide, all right, I'm going to beat the shit out of people, that's a problem. And yet, like, the police aren't filtering those people out. If anything, they're filtering those people in, right? They've got, like, there's this, like, study done where it's like, if you score too high on police tests, they don't accept you because like
Yes.
they think you're too much of a free thinker. They think you won't follow orders properly. So they try to keep police dumb. They try to keep police kind of like running on instinct or emotion rather than having like any sort of actual procedure to follow. And so like it really does turn into a situation where all it takes is one cop to like aim that rifle or aim that like paintball gun or pepper ball gun, whatever it is, and then all the cops see that and they just kind of follow in line. Like you don't like in these situations you don't see like with the whole situation with George Floyd, where you saw like the one officer with his like knee down on his neck, and then the other officers holding them down and just watching it happen, because like, oh, if someone's doing it, I follow the cop. That's kind of the
Yeah.
instinct of the police. And you can see this all over the country. You can see this in Hawaii. You can see this in Alaska. You can see this in New York. You can see this in Minnesota. You can see this in Wisconsin. It's every police department functions almost identically, where it's like they will, like, one cop will be overzealous, and then they just cause a chaotic situation, and then they just blame it all on the protesters. And so that's why like documenting these protests is so important. That's why having people
Yes.
from protests talk about this stuff is so important, because we need to have at least some sort of counter narrative. And I don't know, we might be losing the narrative war. Who knows? I don't know. Like if you polled random people, I don't know what they would say. So like even if this video only gets like 200 views, that'll be some people having more of a recognition of what's happening. And that's really what matters, is because we need to keep the populace informed of what these protests are like, because not everyone's willing to go out. A lot of people, aren't, able-bodied and strong enough to go to these protests, and they might be sympathetic and they want to like have this direct on the ground experience kind of like told to them. So like when you're at these like how many protests have you been to? Like how many nights have you been to?
I actually, unfortunately, I went the only night that I had off of work,
Mhm.
and I've only been able to see what else is going around the city on the other nights, and I've just been checking in with social media as much as I can, because I do have a lot of friends who are at various areas of the protest, which is another dynamic for anyone who does look to get involved in this sort of protest. If you're nervous, there is a safe distance where you can see what's going on if you're very aware of your surroundings. But you bring up a very important point, is that the more every protest is a PR battle, it's an information war, as the phrase is coined. When your little 10-second clip goes up on your Instagram page and your Facebook page, you're giving the accurate narrative, because as we began the conversation, there's always the spin zone. There was one situation where the police were in the parking garage so that they could snipe down on us, and some protesters were at the door of that parking garage. So some of the alt-righters posted the video saying that we had barricaded an apartment building and we were going to burn it down, but it was a parking garage. It wasn't an apartment. Just so yeah. So the greater the presence is at these protests. Hope I didn't lose track of where the question started, but yeah, you want to have a larger presence at these protests, because you're getting information out, and it just creates a better atmosphere. But you don't want to go with the crowd, because the dynamic plays out on both sides, where you see the police get caught up in that mob mentality where they will go along with whatever the most extreme thing that the person next to them is going, and then you see protesters lose themselves in it. There are people that are throwing things at the police, and sometimes those things hit other protesters. But if you're lost in the moment, you're not aware of your surroundings. That's not my preference to where I would suggest someone goes with it.
Yeah, no, for sure. Like that's one of the things that when a lot of this stuff first started up in here, I tried to get a few people I know to like check out the closest city protests, and I was just telling them like there is you like basically the further away from the police you are, the safer you are. Like that is the
Yes.
typical way that this goes. But like with the information war thing, like it really is kind of like a game of telephone. Like you've got these right wingers posting these clips, and then you see like Andy No take that clip, download it, re-upload it, and then give a completely different narrative. And then you see like Donald Trump Jr. retweeting that and then saying something like extra add-ons, like, oh, they're doing this because Trump or whatever. It's like a game of telephone. And then it goes from Donald Trump Jr. talking about it to popping up on boomers' Facebook feeds with no other context, just like a picture of like a tweet, and then like someone describing the picture of the tweet without linking back to the tweet, so you can't really see the video. It's just kind of seeing a description and a picture of a thumbnail, and you get these people, and again, like this dynamic is in my family, where you have these people addicted to Facebook, and they like just scroll down their feeds and they see these things that look official. Oh, it's got text. Like teaching like people desktop publishing in middle school might have been the worst possible thing ever, because you've got these right wingers who can make things look official, like it's a CNN broadcast or a Fox News broadcast, but it's all just disinformation. And so, like, that's why having gone to these protests, one of my favorite things is to just document everything in real time, and like we need those people. And one of the things that's also very important is you've got the right wingers going to these protests and trying to get people's faces documented, trying to identify people, trying to get every single protester on camera at one point. And that way, I know a lot of people have been identified from protests from they're caught in one video feed and you can see like what brand their backpack is. And then like in another video, you can't see their face, but you see that backpack, like rioting and looting or whatever. And then that leads to like Trump, when Trump posted like these wanted photos, like these like FBI bounty things, like a couple, like was that like a month or two ago, I think, where you just went on Twitter and posted like picture after picture after picture of like these like very low quality from like probably like a YouTube live stream that had like 6 viewers in real time, but like they have like they pay these like thousands of people that work for the FBI or whatever to like scour these and like look for that strap, that like the backpack strap that has the logo on it, and then like that's the person. And so like that's why left-wing media is so hard, because you have to be aware that whatever you're doing will be used by the right wing in any possible way. So like you cannot document people's faces like to the best of your ability, right? But you have to still try to get like an overall understanding of what's happening. And so like do you see that many people in these protests like just recording things willy-nilly? Do you know what the awareness is of people being identified is, and how that works when it comes to like documenting what's happening? Or is it just kind of a free-for-all in your view?
That is something that I had given a lot of thought to. about 30 minutes prior to where we got to the bridge where things escalated, I did see people, pointing up, and there were drones overhead. There must have been at least 3 or 4, maybe as many as 6, because you just look up in the sky and you can see them about. And then there were some, I think the police were utilizing the parking garage as well. And that's a very interesting point that you brought up with the FBI using these questionable methods of tracking people down. I recently heard, I think it was the author Vincent Bevins, I believe, the author of the Jakarta Method, was warning, like, um, a brief, that's a book where he talks about right-wing paramilitaries have been utilized across the globe, and we're looking at a lot of these techniques being utilized here on our own citizens. So now we have right-wing paramilitaries like we would have had in Indonesia or we would have had in Nicaragua, and the same type of signature drone strikes this signature drone strikes that you would use on a cell phone in Baghdad or Aleppo is now we're using a backpack logo to track down a protester. And I think it's just important to keep zooming out and seeing these parallels, and just being aware of your present moment, but then also zooming out and seeing the bigger picture.
Yeah. One of the things that I notice is that there's like so many different groups of people, like independent journalists, or just like people that are live streaming, or people that are just like, they're like maybe posting like a little Instagram thing or whatever. Like there's all this documentation. And like, have you like encountered any like mainstream news? Are there like ever people that like, from any like local TV or just like anything that's on cable or whatever? Like, are they ever there trying to like interview people? And if so, how does that go in these situations?
I believe that I believe that it's actually been it's been effective in the sense that even as the media, one of the bigger local news stations has been there, um, there's they haven't been able to spin it, and they've been the victims of some of this violence. They have been hit with pepper balls. They have had the tear gas shot within their proximity, and you can see them. They have press marked very clearly. The police are still targeting them. It's disappointing because even at that level, I wouldn't say that their coverage is completely objective. But as they're putting this raw footage on their website, as they're running it on the news, there's no denying what's going on. There's no denying who's escalating things. And I think that, as I was saying, it's effective in that we're seeing the probably the best type of progress we could hope for a rather, I don't know if I want to just lob the term neoliberal, but our current mayor was not the progressive option in the primary. So we're seeing what you would expect from a more establishment type of Democrat responding to this protest. But had there not been the media coverage, had there not been the independent media and independent photography, we might not have appealed to the protests might not be appealing to the sympathy and the humanity of the people who are now viewing these images. So like just that public relations, that information battle situation. So yeah, there's a lot of there's all sorts of, from the local news station down to the professional photographers down to the independent media. You're seeing a bit of everything.
Okay, so like, what has the response been from the mayor, from like the police chief or whatever? Like, like, so you said these protests have kind of really fired up since Wednesday, like about a week ago.
Mhm.
And so like, has anything like, have you gotten any actual concessions? Has there been any apologies? Has there been any explanations by any of these people? Like, what exactly has arisen from these protests, like quantifiably or tangibly?
You know, the it, from what I can tell, there's just so many parallels to what we're seeing in the presidential race. We're seeing talks about getting we're not, in the sense that we're not going to full defunding. That's not even on. I mean, full defunding isn't on the table. The best that has been proposed is getting increasing the size of the within the police department. There is a mental health response team that is going to be increased, and it's going to be moved outside of the police department. Because if for people that aren't familiar with this specific instance of police brutality that caused these protests, the the brother of the victim called because he was having a mental hygiene alert, which resulted in him being essentially killed in the street. The damage that he sustained did end up killing him later on down the road, but it's pretty hard to deny that it was the result of how the officers handled the situation.
Like, yeah, we see a
So,
lot of these cases where someone someone who's, maybe schizophrenic and ran out of medication and they're scared, so they call the cops because that's what they've always been told to do. Or like someone who's, and then the cops show up and they've got guns and they don't really care about anything, and they just kind of show up and go like, there's no problem, there's no crime occurring. But they treat like someone who's calling for help as if they're a criminal, and it just results in them either brutalizing them, mocking them, abusing them, or killing them. And so, like, this is just it's ridiculous that we have like the cops that show up with guns. And I've dealt with this too. I've had cops show up over, something like a mental health call, and they show up with guns and they like rest their hand on their gun and like, try to like talk
yeah,
down to you, and it's like, what are you doing? Like, if like it's so inappropriate. It's like, I'm thinking of an analogy that is difficult. It's like if you were in school, right, and instead of like going to the principal's office, you go to like, a sheriff's office. It's just ridiculous over like minor issues. And like a lot of the time, like, oh well, what if I needed to ask my guidance counselor or something, and instead of a guidance counselor, you talk to someone with a shotgun in their lap. It's threatening. It usually escalates the problem instead of de-escalates the problem, and it just provides this like aura of like, there's a lot of communities like myself. I will never call the cops. If someone's breaking into my house, I would rather try to deal with it myself than call the police, because I know that if I call the police, chances are that's just going to be a headache. Right, they're not going to like
yeah,
fix the problem. Right, they're only going to make the problem worse, and they're probably going to show up way after the problem's already been dealt with, way after I've been killed, or way after like we've figured something out. Like, and so like it's I like the mental health thing is really important, because like people have this idea that 911 is an emergency line, but like it's not for the most part. 911 is like, you're going to get armed thugs wherever you tell them to line. And it like we're taught like from media, from like cartoons, from like television, from a young age that, oh, when you need help, call the police. And yet it's example after example where people do need help and they don't know what to do, and their first instinct is, oh, I know, call the cops, and that just makes everything much worse. You know what I mean?
yeah. And it was evident as even from the perspective of the police, as they're saying because this was a mental health call, the tools that they utilized were mental health related tools. For example, there was what is called a spit bag over. The man actually had a bag over his head, and he was handcuffed, as the claim was that he was resisting arrest. And then people who are in the social work field were saying, this bag is clearly too tight. This does not have to be this tight. The police were saying that it's easy to breathe through, and the social workers that work with this equipment all the time were saying, no, this is not accurate. This is not easy to breathe through. So it was very clear that not only were they dealing with a mental health situation that they weren't trained for, prepared for, they're using equipment that they don't understand. And that's really the only concrete things that the mayor said. Everything else was very vague. So we're just gonna follow the story and see what more comes out. Hopefully, there may even be updates since I last really checked in. And the other thing that, while we're talking about the local politics here, there were some real shining stars. Serving in the city council right now, I believe, was her primary opponent, Rachel Barnhart. She's a really good progressive. She had some very inspirational things to say, and she was right down there at the protest. We have another very progressive woman that's I believe also serving on the counter, Mary Lupien. I hope I pronounced her last name right. And she's been a great progressive. She's been big in the community, and it's. I think that that's another thing for us as progressives to look out for is when these situations happen, who's rising to the who's rising to the occasion, whose campaigns are we going to look at to volunteer for and to donate to. These are the ones we want to keep in mind.
Yeah, we can like just look at Cori Bush, for example. Someone who was
Yes.
in that situation about 6 years ago is now going to be in Congress. So like this is something that like you really, really need to like put your like, when you go to these protests, you need to like pay attention to who's talking, who's speaking, who's like, who are the people leading the charge, because like these are the people that are like if we're going to have any sort of like, political class, it should be people that are familiar with what's going on, that know the people in the community, and that are willing to sacrifice themselves, because we know that a lot of these people get killed. Like if we look at the Ferguson situation, a lot of the activist leaders there were found mysteriously burned alive. So we know that there's a lot of like danger that is involved with being a public figurehead, especially now when you've got like Donald Trump screaming law and order, and you've got like local police departments just shooting at people willy-nilly. This is a very scary thing. So it really is like you have to really respect the people that are like just going to the front lines and trying to do their best, because like what really matters is that we get these tangible solutions, and it doesn't have to be like right now. Like it should be right now, and if we lived in like a perfect world, it would be like yesterday or like 10 years ago. But we really need to just kind of focus on always pushing the bar like to the left, always pushing things to be more open, more transparent, like more safe, more like helpful. So like, do you think that these protests, now that they've got like sparked out, do you think that anything that the current administration, the current mayor, the current city council, is there anything that they can do to quell these protests? Or do you like maybe like reduce them? Or like do you think that this is just going to be happening for like the next 3 months or so, like we've seen in other cities like Minneapolis?
I I really I really don't know. I think that on the one hand, uh, there would have been if they had immediately fired these officers, we could have seen a whole different dynamic. Because then, if only the really I hesitate to use the word extreme, but if only the really active activists were the one. I mean, if the officers got fired and that was enough to please 50, 60% of the protesters, then would there have been the presence and the numbers to push for more change? So, as concessions are made by the mayor, um, I don't know what the response is going to be, but from being down there, from talking to people, and from seeing how people are responding, I'm I'm very proud of my city, and I'm surprised to see how plugged in people are to local politics and how plugged in people are to what's going on. When you can get um, 200 people the first night, 1,500 people the second night, and then we were getting into the thousands of people the following nights. The people are really plugged in. They're following this story, and it's not just it's not, I don't. I think it's more than just angst from being locked up inside from COVID-19. I think that there's really people that have an understanding of what's going on and they want to get involved.
Well, yeah, because that's a dynamic that people have been victims of police brutality, and like we're at a point where like there's a shocking amount of people that maybe they haven't been a victim of police brutality, but one of their friends has, one of their family members have. And so like for a lot of people, this kind of stuff is very personal to them, and so like it doesn't take much, to just go like, oh, there's an action going on, I need to show up. You know what I mean? And so, like, I also think that there having been sustained protests since about May, with the killing of George Floyd, I think that a lot of people are kind of like just waiting in a way for something to happen for them to get organized in their city. Because
Yes.
not like most people aren't leaders. Most people aren't going to organize it themselves. So like all it takes is like maybe a couple people to say, all right, we're going to do something here, here, and here, and this is what we're going to do. And then all of a sudden you get like 3,000 people in the street. And because there's a lot of people that are just sympathetic and they want to help. And I think it's beautiful to see. Do you have anything else you want to talk about as far as Rochester's concerned?
Yeah, there was another interesting thing because you see, as this plays out on social media, as we talked about the reframing and basically the misinformation around certain things that were occurring, and then a lot of people were saying, in the in, it, where are the why aren't the police stopping certain instances of vandalism? And all of the police went to protect the precinct, the public safety building, and on a normal night, there would be police at every corner by the club scene. But why is it okay for the police to abandon their posts there for a whole night? Like, is crime just going to happen throughout the whole city because they need to protect their own building? I think, as pay it, just you don't know what you're going to see, so you want to really pay attention to all of the signs, all of the cues. If something like this begins to happen in your city, so you're aware, so you know what's going on, is all I can really add to that.
That's a good point of cops like just abandoning their posts. When there was a lot of stuff going on in Atlanta, there was like a whole like multiple districts of police doing like a sick out kind of a thing. And they were just doing it in like kind of like the more urban rural or the more urban like populated areas, like the downtown areas. And like they were all just like, all right, I'm not going to go to work today. If you want to defund the police, let's see how it goes. And then all of a sudden crime goes down. You saw this in New York City where like, all the cops just like, all right, you don't like the police? Well, guess what? We're not going to show up. And then crime goes down. And so it's just one of those things where like when police are at their posts, usually like that creates and escalates violence. And there's an argument to be made, the counter argument, well, if there's no police there, how do you know if crime happens? Like if someone gets shot and killed, you're going to hear about it. Like if there's a cop there to act and respond, maybe things could go differently. But if someone's going to get shot and killed, someone's going to get shot and killed. Or if someone's going to get shot, that's still going to be reported. And so it's even when cops don't show up for like a few days and they try to be like, oh, I'm epic, look at me. Like it doesn't really go in their favor. And so like it goes to show that like when you do have a community that's organized, and obviously we can't, like, there's going to be criminals, right? It's not like, oh, I mean, maybe it's possible that we reach a society that doesn't have people like wanting to mug people or rob people or abuse people, but that's unlikely in the current like short term. So like that's where a lot of these like opportunists come from. Oh, the cops are all over here, so let's go over here and break stuff.
Yeah,
But it's like one of
exactly.
those situations where aren't the cops supposed to serve and protect? Isn't that their job? So, like, really, when push comes to shove, what do? They don't serve and protect their community, they serve and protect themselves. And I think that that's something that we really need to, like, analyze more. Because really, it's easy to say something like, oh, I'm a cop, I'm here to help you. But really, like, when push comes to shove, and, when the rubber meets the road or whatever other, thing you want to say, that's when you really get to test whether or not this person is going to do what they've
Hmm.
always said that they're going to do. And it feels like time and time again, every city across America, and even globally for that matter, whenever something happens, that actually tests these people that work in these departments, they fail. Like almost every single time. Like, do you have any examples of that? Like maybe before the protests of cops just like not doing what they're supposed to do, or like showing or like mismanaging certain situations, or like is there much history of animosity between the police and the community, or is it just kind of like run of the mill, like there are cops in the city, no one really knows anything about them, but they exist?
These instances have been passing occurrences. There have been instances of pretty extreme police brutality, and then you do observe just the vagrant lawlessness of the police. I would imagine that you would see this in any American city, where you know they are doing stuff like running through the red lights, driving on the wrong side of the road.
Like stuff you'd
And
see in a sitcom, but like they actually do it. Like it's like it's just fun for them. They just abuse their authority for fun and games.
Yeah, and not even a situation, I'm not talking about 3 a.m. there's no one on the road. I'm talking just flagrant just disobeying of the traffic laws, you know. but it's just that I think that people are just so plugged in now, whereas these were passing events before. Now it's almost personal in a way, because we're all seeing this, and now that we're all down there, we've got a little bit more stake in it.
And it creates a feedback loop, like you were saying.
Mhm.
If they went there and the cops are like, all right, we hear you, we see you, we're gonna fire these guys, they're awful, what else do you need? And if they had like a pleasant conversation or whatever, like, things could have gone entirely differently. But if a
They could have.
protest like emerges and you respond by shooting them with like pepper balls and like tear gassing them, that's going to make more people more upset. And this is the scary part of is that it's so obvious that that's what's happening, and yet you still see these cops not care. It's like they almost like enjoy it. It's like, oh, like it's kind of like, oh, all this police work and all this like patrolling is finally paid off. I get to like pretend like I'm in Call of Duty now. And like, do you feel that like even if there's going to be some cop reform, do you feel like this is going to be something that like I asked earlier, like do you think that people are going to just go back to normal anytime soon? Like, because I can't personally like see and like a going back to like 2012 kind of like kind of like people just obeying the cops or like respecting them, and like I feel like this is just going to continue escalating like just ad nauseum. I cannot see a situation where people like will start respecting police officers, especially after all of what's happening.
It's I don't necessarily know how it will play out, but I think that just as you're saying that the police could have responded one way and it went another way, it's gonna be up to how the police respond, because in order for the police to get to that point where they're civil servants, they're part of the community, all they need to do is just, they could make us look stupid. They could be the situation where it looks like we overreacted. If they're like, all right, we're just gonna follow these new regulations, we're gonna do these de-escalation tactics, and then it's like, then it looks like we overreacted, because then all of a sudden that dynamic changes. But what we saw in the streets and what we could see in the future is that they don't change. But what will have changed is that now, the various council members that I mentioned earlier and other members in the community leadership of these organizations, now they have a platform where now they're at the table. Now people have seen them on the news. Now people are going to be watching what they're saying on social media. So even if you're not plugged in, even if you're not at the protest every night, you know who to follow. So I hope everything that I'm saying, for anyone listening and watching, you're looking out for this in your community. So you see these people come up, you see who the leaders are, you see who to follow, because it's going to be up to them holding the police accountable, showing up at these boards. I think it even sounds like something, some type of task force could be put together. Maybe we'll get community policing out of it. Maybe we'll get new de-escalation tactics and training out of it. It's really going to be a factor of how the police move forward with it and how the community moves forwards with it. Whether things get back to normal, but something will have to change.
So, like, to move this off of the police, what is the like Trump supporting right wing kind of, is there like, what, I don't know the demographics or like voting like demographics of Rochester, but like is there a large like Trump supporting population? Because I did note like that car attack that was happened, and you said that there were like other instances of violence as well. Like, are there like a big contingent of people that are like counter protesters? Like, do you see any sort of maybe counter protester like clashes that aren't involving police like happening? Like, what is that kind of setup?
I mean, in this city, it seems in the surrounding area, no matter where you are, you're 20 minutes from being in this city. So people are, so you have the people that live here are overwhelmingly, I would say overwhelmingly liberal, leaning progressive in a lot of areas. You see that especially you'll see the map in the primaries, and you'll see, I think we went towards, Clinton over Bernie. And so from where I am right now, you go in one direction and you've got Trump's beautiful boaters, you've got the rich suburbs, you've got the lake, You've got, the people with $500,000, $2 million houses, depending on what suburb you're in. Or if you go south, I mean, when you're in southern tier New York, people talk in a southern accent. They fly Confederate flags. They don't know where they are relative to the Mason-Dixon line. So you have that version of Trump supporter in New York. In my specific area, you will see, FUCK Cuomo stickers everywhere.
You can curse. It's okay.
Yeah, yeah. The fuck Cuomo stickers everywhere because, um, on the one hand, you have people who hate Governor Cuomo from the left, but
As they should.
if upstate New York was a separate state, we would have a Republican governor because there's just as many people who hate him from the right. Even though he's a Republican, even though even though he governs as a Republican, of course he's a Democrat. Um, that's the dynamic. We also, we're the city. If you've never heard of Rochester before, I'm sure you've heard of Syracuse, which is over to the east, Buffalo over to the west. Those are also more metropolitan, bigger, more progressive cities. But then you do have these long expanses of rural areas where you are going to see a lot more Trump signs. You're going to see a lot less diversity.
Are they like we've seen like the proclivity to violence from a lot of these people all across like the country? Like, do you see any sort of like, are they violent? Are they kind of people that maybe will have like, the Trump 2020 bumper sticker compared to like having the like "Don't tread on me" with like guns plastered all over their bumper? Like what is like the level of like LARP going on with these Trump supporters in the area?
You know, I think it's bubbling under the surface, but I think it's a lot of the aging out Republican demographic. Like I think it's a more old. It's you don't see that younger alt right type of fervor, but I think that's I'm sure that maybe that's the Gen Z. Maybe they're at home in front of their laptops. Maybe that's the tech generation where that is. But as far as what I can see, it's really more of the I don't it does it's not that I don't see the violence. I don't think that that's going to be as much of an issue.
Okay.
But it only takes one. It only takes one person to drive their pickup in from a rural area and decide that they want to start shooting. So there is that dynamic. There were people that were posting things on Facebook like that. I think one post was that got screenshotted and sent around was 20 minutes from the city, got my AK-47, time to hunt. Antifa this, Antifa that. I got my this type of gun. I'm only there were a few things like that floating around. But yeah, I guess I mean there's that, but I don't see the presence in the flags. I don't see the try and take my gun bumper sticker. It's not as overt.
Yeah, down here in the South, like in my town, like when I go to Walmart, which I refer to as the human hive, I love just like going and looking at all the cars, and I will always see "Don't tread on me" with like AK-47 with a snake and all that. Like the stuff you'd think you'd see like on irony, like left Twitter is like actually on these people's bumper stickers, and that's just kind of scary. But I don't know, like I'm not sure if New York like has that same kind of like crazy
Yeah,
gun
that's why
culture with the Trumpers,
Yeah, that's why I use the phrase bubbling under the surface, because you do see the thin blue line flags on the
right?
trucks. You do see, and I don't even know if these people know necessarily what that means, but even the local Home Depot has the thin blue line flags flying inside of the store. So a lot of it, I mean, when you get into the culture war, it's tribalism. It's just a cultural signifier, is how I see it. I don't know. I don't know how many people are gonna decide to take the law into their own hands, as we saw in Kenosha. I hope that doesn't happen here. But like I said, it only takes one.
Yeah, and with all the right wing misinformation, like they might get their AK and think, oh my goodness, there's rioters and looters breaking into a restaurant and climbing on people's houses. I gotta go. Like all it takes is that one person, and you can end up with 2, 5, 10 people dead. And that's what's so like horrible about it, is that like we are in this kind of like atomized culture where like the cops aren't gonna help. they're the ones on the same side. So it's like really, it's just like it is kind of scary. Um, are you planning on going to any more of these protests, or like what's your schedule like?
Yeah, yeah, I'm definitely going to I'm gonna try to fit it in with, I'm a working class person, just a working class Joe. So I'm gonna, when I can fit it in, I'm gonna get out there. But I do have work the night shift, so
Mm-hmm.
which works out because it seems like I do think I do think there is a dynamic where if I don't want to I don't want to take the right wing side here, but you protest, you make your point, you hold the line, but after a certain time of night, that's when you run the risk of someone who's fed up and had enough by that time of night. Maybe they've had enough drinks where they get in their car with a gun. That incident, I was already home by the time that incident happened with the vehicle that hit that person, and they sprayed the bear mace out the window. So I think that if I do make it out there, at least I'll be there to catch the more safer end of the protest, probably
Yeah.
the more civic minded part before it kind
Things
of
usually start devolving around like the midnight line, and
yes
just go
devolving.
up
Yeah.
until like the sun comes up. Typically, in my experience. Um, but yeah, I mean, I do you have anything else you want to say? I think we covered most of what I was thinking. Um,
Yeah,
was this good? Everything good here?
yeah. I mean, I think I've spoken to everything that I can speak confidently on. I don't want to go out over my skis and speak to anything that I don't.
No, my internet. Oh no. Hello?
The culture of it and what's happening right now is total. Oh,
My internet
is
cuts
totally
out
new.
sometimes. It's all good.
Oh,
Um, you were saying you were confident and you don't want to, tread on anything that you're, not informed on, and that's good. I don't want to get like a bumbling buffoon on here, but at the same time, I don't mind if you bumble a little bit. Um,
yeah, yeah. So I just I'm just staying in my lane, and that's the general sense of what's going on here.
all right, cool. Um, let's have a little bit of fun. Uh, what do you think about the presidential election?
You know, I think that there's two things happening. There's on the emotional level, there's just like it just feels like people are um people are sick of Trump, and people are going to cling to Biden for some sort of safety. And I do get a sense that there's some people on the right that could decide, hey, Biden's all right. I'm not going to show up and vote for Trump, even for the Trump supporters. But then there's also the part of me where you look into, I've been following as far as what's going on with the electioneering and election meddling. Some Joe Palace has put out some great work. Then there's that factual side of the math might just not work out. You got what's going on with the mail-in ballots. Al Gore has already set a precedent in the year 2000 that if the votes come in one way that night, you don't wait for the recount. If Trump is relying on less mail-in votes and he's up at the midnight on November 8th and he calls it, I don't think the Democrats are going to fight back. So I do feel like, I feel like Trump might just be staying in office.
Yeah, I mean, like, are you gonna vote for Joe? Are you like what is your proclivity here? Because I know that a lot of people on the left, this is a hot button topic. There's a lot of people on the left that instead of talking about mutual aid and protests and how bad cops are, they'd rather just vote shame people for voting for Joe Biden. Like, what is your opinion on that kind of stuff?
I am going to literally take a clothespin, put it on my nose, and walk into the voting booth and vote for Joe Biden. I think
Wonderful.
the argument of running up the vote tally strikes a chord with me. I did vote for Hillary Clinton in 2016, which I don't think I have to say was not my choice during the primary. If that upsets some people that like the Green Party, I'm not going to tell you how to vote,
I
but
am a I am a
that's where
Green
I'm at.
Party defector. I voted for Jill Stein last time around, in Maryland, and now I live in North Carolina, so my vote actually matters. And I'm like, all right, I'm not. First of all, I don't even really like Howie Hawkins as much as Jill, and then also,
Yeah.
this election is too important. I know, blah blah blah. But like, I don't know. I don't take it too important. As far as the presidential election, my main thing is like, if Biden wins, he needs to be inaugurated from a bunker. Things aren't going to change. We need to not lose steam at all. And I don't think we will, because like Obama did run more progressive. There was like that kind of people who thought he was going to come in and fix things, and obviously that was a ruse. But Biden's not really doing that. He's like, condemning the rioters and looters, saying he wants to prosecute anarchists. Kamala Harris is the VP pick. I don't know if there's going to be like a good argument for the left will go to sleep, because I don't even know if there was a left in like 2007 or 8. Um Whereas like we have like the bonds that are being made from these protests, the community organizing. I don't think that's going to change with Trump out or with Trump in. I think the severity and like kind of the tactics will change, but I don't think the displeasure with the government will go away all of a sudden. I don't think many people are
Yeah.
under that many illusions. Um,
Yeah, I agree with that a lot. You don't have a ticket that's going to put the people that are out in the streets are not going to be satisfied with this ticket.
yeah, like the liberals aren't helping anyway. Like they might retweet a few things and share some stuff on Facebook that can kind of help us out, but overall, their support level is almost non-existent. So if it puts them back to sleep and they want to go back to brunch, I say let them. I think that gives us more room to work with. But hey, I might be wrong. I don't know.
Wow, I mean that's really my sentiment. I don't know. Is it okay for two people on the left to agree?
I
Like,
don't think so. So I'm gonna have to change my opinion. I'm gonna vote for Trump. It's I've been convinced. No, but seriously, I don't know. I think people take the presidential election a little bit too seriously,
yeah.
and I like your measured takes when it comes to it. It's like it's not the most important thing in the world. Like you see all these people on Twitter like
Hmm.
all day, every day, like Joe Biden, like reply guying to Joe Biden like the Krasensteins would to Trump, and it's just like embarrassing, and it's just like, can we talk about something more important? And that's why I've been trying to focus on protests. I've been trying to focus on all this stuff, and I will chime in the presidential election because it does get clicks, and I try to use those videos to like direct people away from caring about the presidency that much, but it is still kind of important. Um, and yeah, I don't know. Do you have anything else you want to talk about?
Yeah, I mean, just that sentiment. I mean, I'm on, you found me on Twitter, so I'll go out with what I tweeted today. That same sentiment of people are still logging into Twitter to say I will not vote for Joe Biden. Like it's the
We get
bravest
it.
thing in the world.
It's
Where
profound.
meanwhile, I mean, like the rest of my Twitter feed is talking about how they took a tear gas canister to the face, and they're washing pepper spray out of their clothes, and they had dogs chasing them. Like, so it's like, well, what is your engagement in politics in this moment? You know, is the presidential election the biggest thing going on right now? I have to agree with you there. It's not. It isn't.
And that's the thing. It's like I was saying, Joe Biden needs to be inaugurated from a bunker. Like I would prefer he win, but that doesn't mean I support him. That doesn't mean like I endorse his entire criminal record. We need to choose who the enemy is, and I don't even say need. Like if you don't want to vote, I don't really care, honestly. Like I'm not much of a vote shamer, but I think there's like this very interesting contingent of people. Um, that only got into the left via Bernie Sanders and via electoralism. And somehow, like 3 to 4 months into this mass civil unrest and uprising, still haven't really figured out what the left is. And so they're still like stuck
Hmm.
in this like, oh, we gotta, like, it's kind of like the protagonist syndrome where it's like, I gotta talk about my opinions on the presidential election like I'm Nate Silver, and like, but you've got like 500 Twitter followers, like no one really cares. Um, and I love making fun of those people, but I won't do it so much. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. Good talk. If you have any more information that you want to come on, like I don't really have like a concrete show, like so I just kind of do this stuff willy nilly, So like if there's something that happens, or if you want to like shoot the shit or whatever, hit me up, and that's fine with
Yeah,
me.
totally. I really appreciate you having me on. I've been checking out your show, and you have diverse representation. You do a great program. I'm glad I got to be a part of it. And if we do this in the future, I'm open to it
There you
when I
go.
have when I have more to share. Yeah.
That's what it's all about. Even if you have nothing to share, sometimes I just got to fill a time slot.
That
But
could be better.
yeah. Um, do you have any last words, plugs, anything at all whatsoever?
Um, I mean, my Twitter handle is Ruben's Blocklist. You can follow me there for, hot takes.
All right. All right. I am now going to turn the recording off. Is that comfortable? Do you consent?
Yes.
Okay, it's off.